Hello, and welcome to Ruth Reacts to Books. I'm your host, Ruxie, Ruth McGouth. And today I am reacting to Agency by William Gibson. So this is the second book in a series. I mean, it is just a 2-book series. The first is called The Peripheral. And this book I have already read. I don't believe I have a Ruth Reacts to it because I think I read it while I was not doing the show. So this one, there is also an Amazon Prime show that does a pretty good job of kind of going into this one. I mean, obviously the book's always better than the movie, right? But the show does a decent job of showing you some of this book. It did end up getting impacted by COVID and the writer strike that happened around that same time. So it got sort of canceled before they really completely finished doing everything. So you do kind of need to read the book to truly know how everything ends. But they kind of finished it out. I don't know. It's worth a read and a look. But I'll tell you, when I read this one, I tried to listen to the audiobook for this one, and it was so difficult to understand that I had to read the physical book because it was challenging to understand. So this is the first one, and then Agency is the second one. They are sort of related but not at the same time. So if you read Agency and you haven't read this one, it doesn't really spoil a lot of stuff for you about the first one because you don't actually really hear very much about the people in the first one and the second one. You only hear about a couple of the characters. But I absolutely recommend reading the first one first, because otherwise you will understand a lot more about what you're reading in the second one. However, the characters don't overlap greatly. So I'll read the back of the book of Agency, and then I'll tell you a little bit about it. In fact, maybe I'll just read the back of both books and I'll kind of do like a bit of a double review. All right, so this is for The Peripheral, which is the first one. It says, Flynn Fisher lives down a country road in a rural, near-future America where jobs are scarce unless you count illegal drug manufacturing, which she's trying to avoid. Her brother Burton lives or tries to on money from the Veterans Administration for neurological damage suffered in the Marines' elite haptic recon unit. Flynn earns what she can by assembling products at the local 3D print shop. She made more as a combat scout in an online game playing for a rich man, but she has to let her shooter games go. 70-some years later, Wilf Netherton lives in London on the far side of decades of slow-motion apocalypse. Things are pretty good now for the haves, and there aren't many have-nots left. Wilf, a high-powered publicist and celebrity minder, fancies himself a romantic misfit in a society where reaching into the past is just another hobby. Burton has been moonlighting online, secretly working security in some game prototype, a virtual world that looks vaguely like London, but a lot weirder. He's got Flynn taking shifts, promising her that the game's not a shooter. Still, the crime she witnesses there is pretty bad. Flynn and Wilf are about to meet. Her world will be altered utterly, irrevocably, and Wilf, for all his decadence and power, will learn that some of those third world types from the past can be badass. So, I would say, I can't remember exactly what I gave The Peripheral, but I gave it a higher rating than I gave Agency. So, that was The Peripheral's synopsis, and here's Agency. William Gibson has trained his eye on the future for decades, ever since coining the term cyberspace and then popularizing it in his classic speculative novel, Neuromancer, in the early 1980s. Now Gibson is back with his New York Times bestselling novel Agency, a searing and incisive follow-up to The Peripheral. Verity Jane, gifted app whisperer, takes a job as a beta tester for a new product, a digital assistant accessed through a pair of ordinary-looking glasses, Eunice. The disarmingly human AI in the glasses manifests a face, a fragmentary past, and a canny grasp of combat strategy. Realizing that her cryptic new employers don't yet know how powerful and valuable Eunice is, Verity instinctively decides that it's best that they don't. Meanwhile, a century ahead in London, in a different timeline entirely, Wilf Netherton works amid plutocrats and plunderers, survivors of the slow and steady apocalypse known as the jackpot. His boss, the enigmatic Ainsley Lowbeer, can look into alternate pasts and nudge their ultimate directions. Verity and Eunice are her current project. Wilf can see what Verity and Eunice can't. Their own version of the jackpot just around the corner, and the roles they both may play in it. All right, so I gave Agency 3.25 stars, which means I did like it. I didn't love it, but it was a good book. I mean, I did enjoy it. I know it's hard. You think, like, is my screen just doing this? No, that's the book cover. It's blurry. It has that loading sign. That's what it looks like. So what did I like about the book? Well, it was somewhat intriguing of a storyline. It was not as good as The Peripheral. I certainly did like that. So you kind of heard, like, Wilf Netherton and his group of people are in both books. So we do see some of these characters again. And we do actually get to hear a little bit about Flynn and Burton and that cast of characters. We hear a little bit about how those guys are doing in this book, but not a lot because it's mainly focused on this other person, Verity. But we do get to hear a little bit about how those characters are doing, who we did come to care about in The Peripheral because they did a good job of that. And I do think that the storyline here in Agency and in Peripheral, actually, both of them, are very relevant to today. I'm interested to see when this was published. And it said that Necromancer was so this was in 2020. Okay. So it makes sense that this is very relevant to today because it was, like, pretty recently published in 2020. So I get why it's relevant. He knows exactly what's going on around right now, and AI being what it is, and kind of like the war of what's happening in the world right now. What I didn't like about this book, especially compared to The Peripheral, was I felt like the characters in this one were a little flat, like one-dimensional. I didn't find that I cared as much about what was happening to Verity and her group of people as I certainly did find that I cared a lot in The Peripheral about Flynn and Burton and those folks. And so I'm not sure why that happened. Like, looking back, I mean, they're same length of book pretty much, but somehow I didn't come to care for these characters anywhere near as much as I came to care for the ones in the other book. Also, this one seemed confusing. There were plot holes, I felt, that didn't seem to make a lot of sense in this one. So I felt like, even though, and I will say both of them were kind of confusing. Like I said, I had to go, read that one. I couldn't listen to just the audiobook of that one because it was, at first, there's a lot of things that you're trying to wrap your head around, like what exactly is happening. And certainly if you started out trying to watch the show, you would also be like, what the heck is happening? So I definitely recommend reading the book first, then watching the show. But yeah, I felt like there were some confusing things in this book that didn't quite line up and didn't quite make sense. And so that, I always struggle with that. I want things to be able to make sense. For the food that I attached to this book, in the book, there's a point where Wilf, you hear that he lives in London. He goes and meets a friend, and they have a full English breakfast. So I've got a link to how to do that, because some people like to hear what is a full English breakfast and how might you make that. It's not really a recipe so much because there's not a lot of recipeing to do for a full English breakfast, but it'll tell you how to put one of those together if you want to try having one. And then for my nails, this is a set called Arch and Wave, and it's sort of, I don't know, it was giving me like techie vibes with this sort of circles, and I don't know if the other hand, it's kind of got some lines, and yeah, I don't know. It was I don't know if you can see it, like the circles are made of the lines, and it was just giving me vibes of tech and futuristic AI-ness. I don't know. Was the closest I could come when I was looking through my nails to find something that sort of was giving me vibes of agency. So that's what I got for you this week, folks. I hope you've all had a good week. You're hanging in there. And I'll be back next week with yet another episode of Ruth Reacts to Books. Hope you're all reading. See you later. Bye.